In today's video, we're going to take a look at 5 common reasons why your XLOOKUP function might not be working. First things first, we're going to go through an example of how to use the XLOOKUP function to make sure that we are using it as intended. And to do so, we'll demonstrate with an example where we have some customer data over here, and we have another data set over here containing some order, date, and shipped information. And we want to use the XLOOKUP function to join that all into one data set. So to get us started, we'll start by typing XLOOKUP. And first things first, we want to look at our lookup value. And that's going to be what is the common join point between our data sets, which in this case, we have 2 order ID columns, which will be our join point. So our lookup value is first going to be our order ID over here. And then where are we looking up that order ID, which will be in this order ID column. And based on finding that order ID, XLOOKUP is then going to ask us what do we want to return. And in this case, we're looking for our order date, which is found in this column. And then we enter into our optional arguments for XLOOKUP, which is what do we want to have happen if it's not found. In this case, we can either leave blank or type something we want to have happen, which we can leave blank by hitting comma. And then it'll ask us which match mode we want to look for. So if we want to look for the exact order ID or similar order ID, in most cases you want to use exact, which it'll default to if we leave blank, or it can hit 0, which is also the default. And then it'll ask us which search mode. And this will ask us if we want XLOOKUP to start from the top to the bottom when looking at the data, or start from the bottom to the top. And once again, if we leave blank, it'll default from first to last, or we can hit 1, which is the same default. And we can pull our formula down here. And for order ID 1, we can see that this pulled over the correct order date. And to get our shipped information, since we already wrote out our XLOOKUP function, we can copy that, paste into this cell. And then instead of looking at our order date column, we can look at our shipped column and pull that down. So going through making sure that we are using the XLOOKUP function correctly, looking at the right lookup values and right return arrays to get our answers. Now, a second issue you might run into when using the XLOOKUP function is reference arrays. And what that can look like is when we click into our formula here, we can see that this looks normal that we just looked at in our last example. But as we go down each cell, we can see that the references of our formula are changing as we go down. And to prevent that from happening, we can make sure that we're locking our arrays by hitting F4, which we'll see will put a $sign in front of our column and rows, which means that those will not move. And we want to make sure that we do it for both our lookup array and return array. And then as we pull our formula down and look at our formula, we can now see that the reference arrays are staying the same. So we're looking at the same data set each time we're asking the formula to run. A third issue you might run into with XLOOKUP is array length. And what that means is when we click into our formula in the formula bar and we visually look over to the side here, we can see that these 2 arrays are referencing a different amount of cells. And anytime that happens, XLOOKUP function will return a value error, so making sure that these are the same length. And we can see that that then corrects this formula. And same thing for this one, we can see these are 2 different lengths. We bring those back to the same, pull that down, and XLOOKUP function is now happy. A fourth case we might run into, and this one can get a little bit more complicated and does require a little bit more attention to detail, is making sure that our data is formatted in the correct way. And this can show up in various ways, such as numbers being formatted as text. So it's always good to double check as we click into these columns, making sure that these are formatted as numbers and these order IDs are also formatted as numbers. Sometimes it can come through as text. And another thing we'll also want to make sure is any other records that we're potentially joining on are formatted in the same way with no spaces or any unusual characters within them. So to highlight an example that you might come across is for the second order ID, we're noticing that this is returning an error. So it's looking for, in this case, we're looking at first name as our join point. And we see that the name it's looking for is Letta. And over here, we can also see it. And that might raise the question of, these look the exact same. Why is that finding that? And a good check to do anytime you're noticing something like that is to poke into the formula bar up top and see if you notice anything different. And in this case, we can see that for our data over here, our cursor ends right at the end of the A. And in this case, we're noticing there's actually a hidden space here, which wouldn't be visible to the eye. So if we delete that space, we can then see that our formula returns the correct order date. So now that's finding the exact match. So something to be careful of. So we can see for Gwen, we click into here, run into the same issue. So we get rid of that blank space. And for this record as well. So something to double check once again, that numbers are formatted in the correct way. Any text fields don't have any hidden spaces or extra spaces that to our eye might seem like they look the same, but as the formula is looking for the exact field and characters to match, it might return an error. Now, the fifth case that we might run into is how XLOOKUP is finding duplicate values. And this is something depending on what type of data you're looking at and what the use case of the analysis that you're doing and the goal of it can determine how we might want to handle some of these situations. But let's say we ran our XLOOKUP function and we're noticing that within our data we had the same user record twice, but for two different orders. And in that case, we can see that it's going to return the same order date for both of those records. Now, there could be a few ways that we handle this where, depending once again, if we wanted to count these as unique orders, we could do some processes like updating our order IDs to make sure that these are unique between our data sets. And in that case, we'll look for the updated order date based on that unique order ID. There could be other ways we handle this, like if we wanted just the first record of an order date, we could sort this and have the XLOOKUP look from the earliest date to the oldest date. If we wanted the most recent date, we could also sort that. So something to keep in mind with how your data is formatted and structured. If you do have duplicate records, then XLOOKUP is going to either look for the first record or start looking, first record top to bottom, or it can start looking from the bottom to the top. But if it does find duplicate lookup values, it's going to return the first one that it finds. So just something to be aware of if you're returning unexpected results, making sure that you are accounting for duplicates and thinking through how that might impact the data that you want that formula to pull through. So those are 5 common reasons why the XLOOKUP function might run into some issues. Hopefully that helps you out when you're troubleshooting.